These are the basic materials that you'll want to have in order to try to make this for both the new wing lock style and also the traditional. So some things that'll come in handy, you need some kind of gasket material for the bigger one. So I picked this up at the Home Depot. I'll put a picture of what it's near in the store in case you need to find some. This is a sprinkles container that I already had inside the kitchen. And the reason it works is because it has a bigger lid with a nice wide thread. So in order to do the wing lock style, that'll come in handy. Making the older style is much easier. Any standard soda bottle will work. And even easier too is that on the older style, a standard 50-cent or less garden hose washer fits. So that's the easy one. You have to get a little bit more creative with the new wing lock one. Having some kind of way to measure whatever you end up having for a cap in a bottle is going to be very important. So in this case, if you have some calipers, that'll be best. You can definitely make do with tape measure though. The first thing that we'll do in order to get the bottles ready is decide where we're going to cut them. So on these standard soda bottles, you can see that there's this clear part that's underneath the cap. So you want to cut on this side of that cap. And then on this style too, you can see it's pretty similar. There's this raised circular rim there. So I'm going to cut on that side of that. There's a lot of ways you could cut this. Razor blade would work. I've got this vise here. So I'm just going to put things into a vise, clamping down on that ring like I just showed you. You can't go too tight because you'll crush it. So there we go. We'll clean that up in a second, but that's perfectly fine. We can trim that up, make it nicer looking in a minute. We're going to do the same thing for this one. And there we go. So to clean this up, I just have a little bit of sandpaper here. It's up to you how clean you want to get this. It's not really that important, but you don't want it to cut the pack liner, so it's worth getting rid of the sharp edges. So that's better. I might take a little bit more off when I'm not filming just to make it a little bit cleaner. Same thing for this one. All right, let's take a look at the measurements on the wing lock valve. So this is the newer style that they've been making for the past, I don't know, 5-ish years. So it's important to know, essentially it's just about 5/100ths, 4/100ths under an inch. So a little bit less than 1 inch for the diameter there. You can also see that it has this ring, and that actually really helps with the inflators because it helps let the washer from the gasket get stuck on that, and it's even smaller. But that's roughly the size that you need for that. And then this is the more classic one that's been around since the 70s. It kind of tapers. So if we kind of go just based off roughly off the middle, you can see right there, it's about 6.5 or 64/100ths. The very end, a little bit smaller, and back here about just a little bit bigger, about 1/100th of an inch. So what really matters for your caps is that you have something that can have a hole big enough to be greater than the valve that you're making the hole for. So in this case, a standard soda bottle for the old school, we'll call it, Thermarest is totally fine. You can just bore that out. And then with the newer kind, it's a little bit tricky. So I've looked at the grocery store specifically for bottles like this, and you might find something in the spice aisle, or if you're trying to say something that you already have, your spice cabinet. But both of them that I've made have worked out really well with, specifically with the sprinkles container. So you might have to take one for the team and go buy a bunch of ice cream and eat it just to get this. I'm sure you can handle that. There's a lot of different ways that you can make holes inside of these caps. Probably the simplest one would be using a drill. If you have access to more advanced equipment, such as a laser cutter, or if you know anybody that has a laser cutter or a CNC machine, those can both work really well too. It's entirely up to you and what you have access to. I'm fortunate to have access to quite a few different tools out here in my shop. But for demonstration purposes, I'll use a pretty inexpensive Forstner bit set and my drill press. I'm going to work on the larger cap first. So in this case, I've got a 1-inch bit. And it's important to have it pressed down into something, so find a piece of scrap wood or something. It's actually kind of nice. This one has a little dimple in it, which will really help me line that up. Probably smarter if I don't actually just hold it. So that went pretty well. The smaller cap's kind of tricky because it's a lot flimsier, so it's really hard to clamp. But what I'm going to try to do is do a center hole punch right in the middle to try to give it a spot that the tip of the Forstner bit wants to naturally seat. Might be a good idea, if you're comfortable with it, to try to do this cap while it's still attached to the bottle so it gives it some stability. Not quite straight, but that'll work. So your standard size garden hose washer goes in first. And then you'll have to screw this in. One thing you might have to do, like I'm seeing with this one right now, is it doesn't want to thread. So I'm going to have to take the time to kind of clean up that inner sill. So that way the threads can actually bite, because right now it's sticking out too far. So in order to get rid of that inner lip here, there's a lot of things you could do. You could either file it away, or you could try to cut it with a utility knife. I'm going to try to tap it out with a chisel. All right, again, not the cleanest thing in the world, but I put my washer in there, and that's what we're going for. So even that kind of crude job, which I could touch it up, that's what we're going for right there. So the hole on this will fit, just like so. Hopefully you can see that. So this one is done. I'll show you how to connect the bag to it in a minute. You just press on like so, that's it. So for this guy, it's going to be a little bit trickier because we need to get a gasket that closes up this area that has a hole big enough for the valve to fit through. But we also need the outside diameter of the gasket to be about as wide as this part is here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to trace it. And so that's what I come up with for my quick rough trace job. This stuff does cut easily enough with a pair of sharp scissors. It's about the right size. So the ultimate test is it has to fit in that cap, which it does. Doesn't need to be super pretty, that should work just fine. And make sure that your threads can close. So now we just need to get a hole into that rubber there that will fit this valve. And this part will be done on this one too. So it's important that you don't use the same 1-inch diameter Forstner bit, because otherwise this hole will be too big and too loose to fit over the valve correctly. So this is a 7/8 inch bit. And so that's what we have here. Now let's see how we did. You can see it's kind of pushing it out right here. So if that hole could be a little bit bigger, that'd be better. But it works. This would functionally work. It's just a little too tight at the moment. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit because it's a little bit too tight with the razor blade. I'm not looking to take a lot off. I'm just trying to shave off a tiny, tiny bit. Let's see how that fits. That'll work. Still a little tight. You can fine tune it. Too tight's better than too loose. I'd be willing to guess that less than 1% of the people that watch this video have access to a machine like this, but if you do, I just want to show how I made this one. So I'm using my Onefinity CNC machine with a JTech 14-watt laser. I've already made my design for the gasket and have imported it. And let's just see how it does. All right, let's wrap this up. So I have here a standard Nylofume trash bag that is really, really popular for using as a pack liner. So there's two ends. Obviously there's the end that opens, which is this. This is the bottom. Doesn't matter which corner you do. What you're going to want to do is just take some scissors and you're going to snip a corner off. You can always snip more, but you can't add it back. So try to be on the conservative side in the beginning. All right, now I got the opening. So I'm going to take my cap, I'm going to pass it up through the bottom. And I'm going to fold it back over the threads. That should do. Doesn't need to be too pretty. Take the cap. Screw it down, and there you go, you're done. Let's take a quick moment to look at the weights. So without the bag attached to it, the old school valve one comes out at 8 grams or 3/10 of an ounce. So on my scale, that comes out to 1.5 ounces or 42 grams. The cap ball by itself comes in at 16 grams, 14 it just dropped, or 1/2 ounce. And a standard Nylofume bag, this one is missing the tiny bit of the corner, but hopefully you don't care that much about that. Weighs almost exactly an ounce. So for 1/2 ounce more, you can have your own inflator. All right, let's check this out in real time now. So this is a Thermarest Neoair NXT, the wide width version, the standard length. So it's 72 inches long by 25 inches wide. Has the wing lock valve. So I'm gonna close it, make sure that the black cap that's closed, that's open. This is the one that we just made. Close this up, and there you go. Let me retard it. So I hope this is helpful. It works really well for me, and I prefer this over carrying those battery-powered pumps that are starting to become more and more popular, because it's one less thing to have to charge the battery on, and this weighs less than adding a metal battery and a little device into your kit. Let me know in the comments below if you end up making one of these, or if you have any ideas on how I could do it more easily, so that way other people in the future can benefit from that. This specifically is the exact Nylofume pack liner that I used on the CDT. This one lasted me for a little over half the trail. And this was the second of the two that I ended up using. There's a little bit of patching on it, but otherwise they're really durable. One thing I did on this one is I added a little piece of cord with a cord lock. So that way it really kind of pinches the bag there and makes it so it's a little bit more water resistant if you're nervous about that. Thanks so much for watching.